Hey everyone, welcome to our Editor and Scripting Foundations course in Godot. So this course is designed for people who've never worked in Godot before. So we're going to be taking things slow and just focusing on the fundamentals of the software. Our goal isn't to build a full game, but it's more to help us understand how the Godot editor and GDScript work so that everything in later courses or other courses makes much more sense. So we'll explore what each part of the editor does, how scenes and nodes connect, and how scripts bring them to life, one simple concept at a time. So first, we'll start off with installation, and then we'll get into getting comfortable within the editor. So we'll learn our way around the panels, the dockers, and basic settings. Then we'll look into the scene system, so we'll discover how everything in Godot is built from a simple concept called nodes. Then after that, we'll dive into GDScript, so we'll get familiar with the syntax, variables, indentation, and basic logic. Just enough to understand scripts that you'll see in future projects without being, overwhelmed. And then once again, we won't be focusing on making a playable project here. We're just building the foundation for all the fun stuff that comes later in the form of different courses. And throughout this, we'll be using lots of Mammoth Club tools, such as interactive coding, fill in the blanks, true and false. After each video, if you want to just test your understanding, and yeah, you can just make sure that you have everything down conceptually. So now we can just actually get into the first step in our first video, which is installing Godot. So in order to install Godot, you can just go ahead and search it on Google, and then you're looking for the website godotengine.org. And from here, you can see that there's an option for downloading the latest version and then reading the patch notes, etc. So if you want the latest stable version, you can go ahead and select download the latest. In this case, it's 4.5.1. But in our case, I'm just going to go to the top bar where it says download. And then you can take a look at all of the versions they have available under experimental releases. So in this case, it's under the scope of the most recent release. We could do 4.6. But in reality, you can just pick the latest stable version if you want. So we can go ahead, look through all the versions that are available, and say we want 4.6 Dev 2 this time around. All you have to do is go ahead and click download, and then you're going to select your supported platform. So I'm going to do Windows Standard, and from here, it's just going to open up a download tab, and then give it a couple seconds to download onto your computer. So after it's installed or downloaded on your computer, then it should be present inside the downloads folder. I just went ahead and drug it into a separate folder. And inside here, you can see it's Godot version 4.6 Dev 2, and that's just a compressed file. So in order to extract it, you can go ahead and just click on it and select Extract All. And then you can just extract it in its current location, or you can extract it into its own unique folder called Godot, or whatever you really want. So I go ahead and just select Extract, and you can see here we get this new file. And the cool thing about Godot in this case is that you don't actually have to install it on your computer. So I could stick this on a USB, and all we have is this executable, and then we can just open it up, and it says for your first time, maybe Windows protecting your PC. This is just because I think it's the non-stable version, but of course there's no worry there. And there you go. You're inside of your Godot engine, inside your project manager. So now you can take a look at all your projects if you have any, and then more importantly, since this is our first time working in Godot, in theory, you can just go ahead and create a new project. So of course, we won't really get into what each one does. I'm just going to keep it at forward plus because we're not looking at making a mobile game. And then you can go ahead and just give it a name. So I'll just call it Godot Fundamentals. And not even Godot Fundamentals. Maybe we'll call it Godot Foundations. And then you can just make sure it's in the folder that you actually want. So you can go ahead and browse to the folder that you desire. And there you go. You click create and you'll have your first project. And as you can see here, it's pretty awesome because again, we don't have to worry about an installation. It just runs as an exe. So you can run it anytime, anywhere. And yeah, you won't have any problems regardless of what PC you're on, which is really awesome. But yeah, just go ahead and click create and we'll be inside of our first project. So after you click create project, it should open a Godot window, and this is what you will be presented with. And this is essentially the engine. So you can see there is a tab for seeing what your game currently looks like, and there's options at the top for 2D, 3D, script, game, asset, library, etc. But either way, we're going to be talking about these in future videos, so I'd like to thank you guys for watching. We just wanted to cover basic installation inside of this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one when, we start tackling the editor and all of its unique elements. Thank you. Hey everyone, welcome back to our Editor and Scripting Foundations course in Godot, in this case 4.6. And now we're just going to be talking about some of the important elements while exploring our Godot editor for the first time. So, of course, we have lots of tabs here, so we're just going to go step by step and discuss all of the important ones and their place when making a game. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is the file system here at the bottom left. And the file system is where your project files live. This is where your scenes live, your scripts, textures, pictures, sounds, typography, you name it. It all takes place here inside of this internal folder explorer. So let's just go ahead and mess around with it a little bit. So whenever you make a game, you're going to have lots of folders in terms of making things organized. So you can right click on your res folder, which is your main root folder where all the files are stored. You can just right click and create a folder. And in this case, when we have a game, it's going to be made up of a lot of scenes. So a lot of reusable objects in order to make the game just easier to work with. A lot less duplication going on. So let's just make a scenes folder. And then of course that just goes underneath your res file, and then you can make as many files as you need. So once again, for sounds, for typography, for pictures, textures, whatever you want. You should create distinct folders to keep things organized. And then inside of there, we'll just right click it, and then we can create more than just a folder. So we can create a script if we need to, program something. We can make resources, we can make simple text files for storing data. But in this case, we're just gonna make a basic scene. Okay, and then here inside of a scene, we haven't talked too much about what a scene really is. Again, it's just a reusable piece of your game. It's kind of arbitrary right now. Let's just try making a user interface in this case. So we'll just call it our first scene, and then we can go ahead and just select OK. So now it's located inside of that scenes folder, and you just have to double click it to open it. And of course, you can see here, it'll give us a proper name inside of our viewport here, telling us which file is open. So again, if we go ahead and click on 2D, we can see that this is what our scene looks like in a 2D world. It's empty. Same thing for a 3D world. We haven't added any actual elements to it. But nonetheless, this is the viewport where all of our visualizations will be taking place. So as you can see here, there's lots of options. There's an option to select elements inside of our viewport, and there's also objects to, options to move it around, rotate elements, scale elements, you name it. So essentially, it's just like any other game editor, but now we just need to figure out, well, how do we add elements to it and take advantage of it? So we're going to take a look now at our scene doc. So the scene doc is essentially where our structure for the scene takes place. So every object or scene in Godot has a node. All right, so every object inside of it is a node. This little green circle here is your root node. So if we want to build on this root node and make it not empty, all we have to do is right click on it and add something called a child node. And in this case, there are a ton of things that we can look at, but since we're working with a user interface, the green circles here, we're going to go to where the other green elements exist. So a control node. And a control node is just a way for us to work with user interface. So in our case here, let's just go ahead and select a label, which is just basic text. So now we have a root node, but attached to it is something called a label node. And then we can just type inside of the right here, this is our first node. And there we go. We can see inside of the viewport tab what is going on with all of our nodes. So we have one with text inside of it, and then you can see that we can just increase or decrease the size of it, not the font, but the actual dimensions. And then we can also, rotate it if need be, and then we can also scale it. So you see there's options for scaling as well. You can just go ahead and mess around with lots of the options, but essentially the viewport node allows us to, mess around with various nodes. So now we have our first node. Well, let's try another one. Let's go into the control node, and then let's just try something. Let's try something else. So in a user interface, usually you have lots of labels. So maybe you have one for the current time, one for how much score you have in your game. It doesn't really matter. So let's try and add something called a VBox container. And what a VBox container does is just stack elements vertically. So it's almost a way of organizing elements inside of our containers. So we can go ahead and just drag our label underneath of the VBox container, and then it becomes an element. So that just means we're creating a hierarchy here. So then if we create a second label, and we'll type inside the text on the right side, this is our second node, you can see that they're now stacked vertically. And again, the reason for that is because they're both elements of the VBox container. So there's tons of different nodes we can use, but if you just take a look around, something like a VBox container just serves a very specific purpose. So then you can go ahead and just right click, create new nodes, and just take a look at all of the options that are available to you. So again, VBox container is for stacking items vertically. Then you have ones for stacking horizontally. You have color rectangles if you just want to make something colored like a background. You have a text edit if you want to type inside of your game. And then the possibilities are more or less endless. You just have to go through all of them and see what node works for you. But of course, in our case, we just look up what nodes are most important. But either way, the scene doc is just how we organize these nodes, even though the behavior is more or less defined in this other node called the inspector tab. So the inspector tab, which is on the right side here, is essentially where we go to change the properties of any node selected. So again, we clicked on the label tab, and then inside the inspector tab, we could change properties such as its text. You could change how it's aligned. You could change the font size. You can change how your mouse interacts with it. There's just a ton of tabs here that you have to explore and try to figure out, well, what you're trying to accomplish. So again, luckily for us, there's a search bar at the top, so you can look up something like font size, and then there's a drop-down menu where you can mess with the font size if that's something that you want. All right, so essentially the inspector tab is just allowing us to set properties for anything we select inside of our scene. So again, we select the VBox container, it's going to have different properties as opposed to our label nodes. So again, they all have unique properties, and the inspector tab is how we alter elements uniquely. Okay, so many developers just tweak gameplay directly through inspector properties rather than rewriting code as well. So it's a great way for us to test ideas, but of course we probably won't get into that. But it's a very powerful tool that gives you full creative control without ever having to leave the editor. All right, so now we covered the file system, the scene tab, the viewport, the viewing tabs at the top, and the inspector. So the last important thing we really need to cover is just the project tab at the top right. So essentially, we don't have a main scene selected yet, but if I go ahead and press the play button, it'll just tell us that no main scene has ever been defined. So we can just go ahead and select current, and this just means whenever we press the play button, it's going to open up this this first scene that we created as our main scene. And there we go. You can see that when we hit play, well, this is what our game now is. It's just taking a look at our two labels that we created and the VBox container, and it's showing it back to us. But that's how easy it is to run a game in Godot. After you hit the play button, the top right buttons also change. So there's an option to restart the project or reload it if you're just testing over and over. There's also an option to just pause the game if you hit pause, which is really awesome. And there's also an option to just stop it. All right, so those are the most important ones. And then you can also just select specific scenes and select them to play. So again, we have a main scene, but maybe you have one for a game over menu. You could just play that game over menu scene specifically, and you just test how it works without having to run through your whole game. All right, so with that in mind, that's more or less going to do it for this video. I just want to show you guys the basics of the Godot editor before we jump into more specifics. But essentially, we have our file system, which stores your project files and assets. And an example of using it is to create and organize your scenes folder in order to keep things organized. And of course, you can use it to just create actual files. And then secondly, we have our viewport. So this is the visual workspace where you build your world. And a good example of when you use this is just to go ahead and select an element, and you can use the viewport to just drag it around. All right. And then once you have your viewport working and you understand it, you have your scenes tab on the left. This is going to show the hierarchy of the nodes in your scene, and it's just going to show everything that you are working with inside of a given scene. So inside of our UI scene, we have a vertical box container and 2 labels, and it's just outlining it for us and allows us to select them and move them around. So for example, we can move it outside of our VBox container, and now it's no longer stacked vertically. All right, and then inside of our scene, if we select an element, it brings us to the inspector tab on the right side. So it allows us to adjust properties of selected nodes. So we can change position, scale, or even attach a script to it. And then lastly, went to the play controls on the top. This is just how you run your game, and you can play a scene directly, you can pause it, you can restart it, doesn't matter. Everything gets ran through this play controls at the top right. So anyways, I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video when we jump into the scene tab more and start discussing nodes more specifically, talking about the different kinds, which ones are the most popular, and their use cases. So I'll see you then. Thank you.